The dust from the departing stagecoach had barely settled when Wilhelmina Dalton made her decision to leave Hawthorne, Nevada forever, clutching her worn leather trunk as she stood on the platform of the train station, her eyes fixed on the iron beast that would carry her back to Boston and away from the heartbreak that had brought her west in the first place. She had come to Nevada territory 3 months ago with such hope, answering an advertisement for a schoolteacher position in this mining town nestled in the high desert, believing she could build a life far from the suffocating expectations of her wealthy family. Her father had warned her about the roughness of the frontier, but Wilhelmina had been determined to prove she was more than just another society belle meant for arranged marriages and meaningless tea parties. At 22, she had wanted adventure, purpose, and independence. What she found instead was a town that did not want an educated woman from the East telling their children about literature and science. The mining families had been polite enough at first, but when she refused the advances of the mine foreman's son and continued to teach girls the same curriculum as boys, the whispers began. Within 2 months, the school board had politely informed her that her services were no longer required. The November wind of 1876 cut through her traveling dress, a sensible navy wool that had seemed so practical when she purchased it in Boston, but felt inadequate against the harsh desert climate. She adjusted her bonnet with trembling fingers, trying to maintain the composure her mother had drilled into her since childhood. Dalton women did not cry in public. They certainly did not cry over failed dreams in dusty railroad stations surrounded by strangers. The locomotive hissed and groaned, releasing great clouds of white steam into the crystalline blue sky. Wilhelmina checked her reticule for the 3rd time, counting the money she had left after purchasing her ticket. It would be barely enough to survive the journey home, and then she would have to face her parents' disappointment, her sister's pity, and worst of all, the satisfaction in Charles Pemberton's eyes when he learned she had returned. Charles, who had proposed marriage before she left, promising her a comfortable life as his wife if she would only abandon her foolish notions of independence. All aboard for Reno, Sacramento, and points east, the conductor called, his voice carrying across the wooden platform. Wilhelmina picked up her trunk, grateful it was not heavier, and began walking toward the passenger car. Each step felt like a surrender, an admission that she had been wrong and everyone who doubted her had been right. She was just a foolish girl playing at being independent, and now she was crawling back to the safety of her father's house and the life that had been planned for her since birth. She had one foot on the metal step, her hand gripping the brass rail, when a large, calloused hand closed gently around her wrist. "Miss Dalton, please wait." The voice was deep and rough, flavored with an accent she could not quite place, something between southern drawl and western twang. Wilhelmina turned, prepared to deliver a stern rebuke to whoever dared to touch her without permission, and found herself looking into the most striking pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders straining against a worn leather vest over a blue cotton shirt. His face was tanned and weathered, with strong features that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. Dark brown hair curled slightly beneath a black Stetson hat that had seen better days. He was perhaps 25 or 26, she estimated, with the kind of rugged appearance that her Boston friends would have found shocking, but that she had to admit was not unpleasant to look at. "Sir, I do not know you, and you are preventing me from boarding," she said, trying to inject authority into her voice despite the way her heart had begun racing. "I know we have not been properly introduced, madam, and I apologize for the presumption, but I could not let you leave without speaking my piece." He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair, and she noticed he looked nervous, almost desperate. "My name is Daniel Walker. I have been working up the courage to speak to you for 2 months now, and I'll be damned if I let you leave town before I do." Wilhelmina blinked in surprise. She had seen this man before, she realized. He was often in town, usually purchasing supplies at the general store or watering his horse at the public trough. She had noticed him because, unlike most of the men in Hawthorne, he always tipped his hat to her politely without staring or making crude comments. She had appreciated his respectful distance, but she had never imagined he had any particular interest in her. "Mr. Walker, I appreciate whatever sentiment you wish to express, but my train is about to depart, and I have no reason to remain in this town." She tried to pull her wrist free, but his grip, though gentle, was firm. "That's where you're wrong, madam. You have at least one reason if you'll hear me out." His gray eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I know what happened with the school board. I know those small-minded fools were too stupid to appreciate what they had in a teacher like you. And I know you probably think this whole territory is full of ignorant men who do not value an educated woman. That assessment has proven accurate in my experience," Wilhelmina said coldly, though something in his words made her pause. "I cannot speak for everyone in Hawthorne, Miss Dalton, but I can speak for myself." Daniel took a deep breath, and she saw his hand tighten on the brim of his hat. "I own a ranch about 10 miles north of here, up in the hills where there is good grass and water. It is not much yet, but I have been building it for 3 years now, and it is starting to prosper. I have cattle, horses, and enough land to support a family." "That is very nice for you, Mr. Walker, but I fail to see what it has to do with me." Even as she spoke, Wilhelmina felt her pulse quickening. Surely he was not about to propose what she thought he was proposing. "I am asking you to give me a chance, Miss Dalton. Do not get on that train. Stay in Hawthorne, let me court you properly, and see if maybe we could not build something together." The words came out in a rush, as if he had been rehearsing them, but they still came out wrong. "I know this is sudden, and I know I am not the kind of man you are probably used to back east, but I swear to you I am honest, hardworking, and I would treat you with the respect you deserve." "Last call for boarding," the conductor shouted. Wilhelmina stood frozen, one foot still on the train step, her mind reeling. This was insane. She did not know this man. He was a stranger, a cowboy, someone completely outside her world and experience. Every ounce of common sense told her to pull her arm free, board the train, and forget this bizarre encounter. But something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the sincerity in his gray eyes. Perhaps it was the fact that he had asked her to give him a chance, not demanded or expected, but asked. Or perhaps it was simply that returning to Boston meant accepting defeat, meant marrying Charles Pemberton or someone like him, meant spending the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she had been brave enough to try. "Mr. Walker, you do not know me," she said slowly. What could possibly have inspired this sudden declaration? A hint of color rose in his tanned cheeks. "I have been watching you since you arrived in town, madam, and I hope that does not sound too forward. I saw how you handled those rowdy Miller boys when they tried to disrupt your class, how you stood your ground with patience and firmness until they settled down. I heard you reading poetry to your students one afternoon when I was passing by the schoolhouse, and the way you made those words come alive made me stop and listen for near an hour. And I saw you help old Mrs. Chen carry her groceries last month, talking to her like she was a real person instead of ignoring her like most folks do." Wilhelmina felt something shift in her chest. She remembered that day with Mrs. Chen. the elderly Chinese woman whose husband had worked on the Transcontinental Railroad and stayed when it was completed. Most people in Hawthorne treated the few Chinese residents as invisible at best, hostile at worst. Wilhelmina had been raised to believe all people deserved basic courtesy regardless of their origin, a belief that had caused almost as much controversy as her teaching methods. "You were watching," she said softly. "I was admiring," he corrected. "Miss Dalton, I am not an educated man like you are used to. I can read and write well enough, but I never had the advantage of formal schooling beyond basic letters. But I know quality when I see it, and I know that a woman like you, with your courage and your principles, is rarer than gold in these parts. The thought of you getting on that train and disappearing from my life before I even tried to know you has been eating at me for days." "Sir, this is highly irregular," the conductor said, approaching them with obvious irritation. "The lady needs to board or we will depart without her." Daniel ignored him, his eyes never leaving Wilhelmina's face. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Miss Dalton. I am just asking for a chance. Stay in town, let me call on you properly, and if after a few weeks you decide I am not worth your time, I will personally buy you a new ticket and drive you to the station myself. But please, do not leave without giving us a possibility." The whistle blew, long and shrill. The conductor was climbing back aboard, shaking his head in disgust at young people and their drama. In another moment, the train would begin moving, and Wilhelmina would have to make her choice. She thought of Boston, of her mother's disapproving frown and her father's lectures. She thought of Charles Pemberton and his assumption that she would eventually come to her senses and accept his proposal. She thought of the life that waited for her there, predictable and safe and utterly suffocating. Then she looked at Daniel Walker, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, at the way he was asking rather than demanding, offering rather than expecting. She thought about the fact that he had noticed her kindness to Mrs. Chen, that he had stopped to listen to her read poetry, that he saw value in qualities most men seemed to find threatening. Wilhelmina stepped back down from the train. Daniel's face transformed, relief and joy flooding his features as she set her trunk back on the platform. The train began to move, slowly at first and then gathering speed, carrying away her ticket home and her return to the life she had known. "You just made me miss my train, Mr. Walker," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I hope you understand the magnitude of what you have done." "Yes, madam, I do." He was still holding his hat, clutching it like a lifeline. "And I promise you will not regret it. Where are you staying?" "I know you lost your rooms at the boarding house when you lost the teaching position." Wilhelmina had not thought that far ahead, and the reality of her situation suddenly hit her. She had just given up her ticket home for a man she did not know, and she had nowhere to sleep tonight. What had she done? Daniel must have seen the panic in her eyes because he quickly said, "Mrs. Patterson runs a respectable boarding house on 3rd Street. She is a good woman, fair and honest. I will take you there and pay for a month's lodging, and before you protest, consider it an investment in my own interests. I want you to have a safe, comfortable place to stay while I court you properly. I cannot accept such a gift from a stranger, Mr. Walker. It would be completely inappropriate." Even as she said it, Wilhelmina realized how ridiculous that sounded given that she had just agreed to let this stranger court her. Then consider it a loan, to be repaid when and if you choose. He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Miss Dalton, I know this is all highly irregular, and I know you must think I am either crazy or up to no good, but I swear on my mother's grave that my intentions are honorable. I want the chance to know you, to show you what life could be like out here with someone who values you for who you are." Wilhelmina took a deep breath, watching the train disappear into the distance, carrying away her escape route. She had committed now, for better or worse. "Very well, Mr. Walker, but I insist on establishing some ground rules for this arrangement. First, you will call on me no more than 3 times per week, at appropriate hours and always with proper notice. Second, I will seek employment in town to support myself, as I will not be dependent on your charity. And third, if at any point I decide this arrangement is not working, you will respect my decision without argument." "Agreed to all of it," he said immediately. "Though I should warn you that finding employment in Hawthorne may prove difficult given how the school board treated you. Folks in small towns have long memories and stubborn prejudices." "Then I will simply have to change their minds," Wilhelmina said with more confidence than she felt. "Now, shall we visit this Mrs. Patterson you mentioned? I find myself suddenly without lodging and rather in need of a place to stay." Daniel grinned, and she noticed he had a small dimple in his left cheek. "Right this way, madam. And Miss Dalton, thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy like me. I will do everything in my power to make sure you do not regret it." As they walked through the dusty streets of Hawthorne, Wilhelmina carrying her reticule while Daniel managed her trunk with ease, she could not help but wonder what exactly she had gotten herself into. This was not how she had planned her day or her life, and yet there was something exhilarating about the uncertainty. For the first time since arriving in Nevada, she felt like the author of her own story rather than a character in someone else's narrative. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that Wilhelmina immediately appreciated. She looked between Wilhelmina and Daniel with obvious curiosity, but asked no prying questions when Daniel explained that Miss Dalton needed lodging for a month. "I have a room on the second floor, faces east, so you will get morning sun," Mrs. Patterson said to Wilhelmina, ignoring Daniel entirely now that the business was being discussed. "Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6, and I do not tolerate drinking, gambling, or improper behavior under my roof. Rent is $15 for the month, including meals. Laundry is extra." Daniel had already pulled out his wallet, but Wilhelmina stopped him with a hand on his arm. "I will pay half now from my own funds, and Mr. Walker may loan me the other half, to be repaid as soon as I secure employment." She gave Daniel a look that brooked no argument. He smiled slightly and nodded. "As you wish, Miss Dalton." The transaction completed, Mrs. Patterson showed Wilhelmina to her room, a small but clean space with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small desk, and a window that looked out over the street. It was simple but adequate, and Wilhelmina felt some of her anxiety ease. At least she had a roof over her head. Daniel set her trunk down carefully and then stood awkwardly near the door, clearly uncertain of the proper protocol for this situation. "I should let you get settled," he said. "But if it would be acceptable, I would like to call on you tomorrow evening, perhaps take you to dinner at the hotel restaurant." "That would be acceptable, Mr. Walker. Shall we say 6 o'clock?" Wilhelmina removed her bonnet, acutely aware that they were alone in her room even with the door wide open. It was scandalous by Boston standards, but then again, everything about this day had been scandalous by Boston standards. 6 o'clock, he confirmed. He started to leave, then turned back. "Miss Dalton, I want you to know that what I said at the train station was true. I have admired you from afar for weeks now, and I never had the courage to approach you properly. When I heard you were leaving, I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life if I did not at least try. So thank you again for giving me this chance." After he left, Wilhelmina sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. What had she done? She had just committed to being courted by a cowboy she barely knew, in a town that had already rejected her once, with no job and rapidly dwindling funds. By any rational measure, this was a disaster in the making. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see the look in Daniel Walker's gray eyes, the vulnerability and hope mixed together. She could still feel the gentle but firm way he had held her wrist, not forcing but asking, always asking. And she could not shake the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, she had made the right choice after all. That night, lying in her narrow bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, Wilhelmina thought about her family in Boston. They would be expecting her to arrive in another week or so. When she did not appear, would they worry? Would they send someone looking for her? She would need to write to them, she decided, explaining her decision to stay in Nevada. She would not mention Daniel Walker yet, not until she knew if this improbable courtship had any chance of success. Her mother would have hysterics if she knew her daughter was being courted by a rancher. The next morning, after a breakfast of eggs, biscuits, and strong coffee with the other boarding house residents, Wilhelmina set out to find employment. She visited the general store first, hoping they might need help with their accounts or inventory. The owner, a balding man named Mr. Griggs, listened politely to her inquiry and then shook his head. "I am sorry, Miss Dalton, but my wife and I manage the store ourselves. We do not need additional help." He would not meet her eyes, and she suspected his refusal had more to do with her reputation than his actual staffing needs. She tried the hotel next, then the newspaper office, then the assayer's office. Everywhere she went, the answer was the same polite refusal. By midday, Wilhelmina was dusty, tired, and increasingly discouraged. It seemed Daniel had been right about small-town memories and prejudices. She was walking back toward the boarding house, wondering if she should have boarded that train after all, when she heard a familiar voice call her name. Turning, she saw Mrs. Chen approaching, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. "Miss Dalton, is true you stay in Hawthorne?" the elderly woman asked in her accented English. "I hear you missed train yesterday." News traveled fast in small towns, Wilhelmina reflected. "Yes, Mrs. Chen, I decided to remain here for a while longer." Is good, Mrs. Chen said, nodding enthusiastically. "You are kind lady, most people not kind to Chinese, but you are different. You need job, yes. I hear you looking for work." "I do need employment, yes," Wilhelmina admitted. "But I have not had much success so far." Mrs. Chen's weathered face broke into a smile. "You come with me. My daughter, she run laundry business, very successful. She needs someone who can read, write, keep books in English. Chinese customers no problem, but American customers want someone who speak perfect English. You come, I introduce you." Wilhelmina felt a surge of hope. "That would be wonderful, Mrs. Chen, thank you." The laundry was a large building on the edge of town, with great vats of boiling water and lines of washing hanging to dry in the desert sun. Mrs. Chen's daughter, May, was a capable-looking woman in her 30s who spoke excellent English and ran her business with impressive efficiency. She listened to Wilhelmina's qualifications, asked several pointed questions about her bookkeeping skills, and then offered her a position on the spot. "I can pay you $20 a month to manage the accounts, handle correspondence with customers, and help with the English-speaking clients," May said. "The work is not glamorous, but it is honest and steady. Are you interested?" "I am very interested," Wilhelmina said, relief flooding through her. $20 a month was not much, but it was enough to pay for her room and board with a little left over. More importantly, it was honest work that would let her maintain her independence. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning, if you are available. I can show you the books and explain the system." May extended her hand and Wilhelmina shook it, sealing the agreement. Walking back to the boarding house, Wilhelmina felt lighter than she had all day. She had a job, a place to live, and that evening she would have her first proper dinner with Daniel Walker. Perhaps this impulsive decision was not such a disaster after all. She spent the afternoon washing up, pressing her best dress, a deep green silk that brought out the color of her hazel eyes, and arranging her auburn hair in a style that was elegant but not too elaborate. When Daniel arrived at precisely 6 o'clock, wearing a clean shirt and vest with his dark hair still damp from washing, she felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "Miss Dalton, you look lovely," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you, Mr. Walker. Shall we go?" The hotel restaurant was the finest dining establishment in Hawthorne, which meant it had actual tablecloths and menus written on chalkboards. Daniel held her chair for her with the careful courtesy of someone trying hard to remember proper manners, and Wilhelmina found his nervousness oddly endearing. Over dinner of roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables, they began the delicate process of getting to know each other. Daniel told her about his ranch, how he had come west from Missouri 5 years ago with nothing but his horse and his saddle, working various jobs until he had saved enough to buy his land. He spoke about his plans for the future, breeding better cattle, improving his water sources, maybe one day having the finest ranch in the territory. "What about your family?" Wilhelmina asked. "Do they still live in Missouri?" A shadow crossed his face. "My mother died when I was 16, consumption. My father followed her 2 years later, just seemed to give up after she was gone. I have a sister somewhere, married and moved to California last I heard, but we have not kept in touch. Coming west was about starting fresh, building something that was mine." "I understand that feeling," Wilhelmina said softly. "My family is well established in Boston. My father is a banker, very successful, very respected. They have my entire life planned out for me, who I should marry, how I should behave, what I should want. Coming to Nevada was my attempt to escape all of that and find out who I actually am, separate from their expectations." "And what have you discovered so far?" Daniel asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Wilhelmina considered the question seriously. "I have discovered that I am braver than I thought, and more stubborn. I have discovered that I care deeply about fairness and education, enough to fight for them even when it is unpopular. And I have discovered that I would rather fail at building my own life than succeed at living someone else's." "That takes real courage," Daniel said quietly. "Most people never figure that out." They talked for hours, long after they had finished eating. Wilhelmina told him about her love of books, how she had spent her childhood reading everything she could get her hands on, much to her mother's dismay. Daniel talked about learning to handle horses, how he had a gift for working with difficult animals that others had given up on. They discovered they both loved thunderstorms, both hated oysters, and both had a tendency to take on causes that others considered hopeless. "I got a job today," Wilhelmina said as they were leaving the restaurant. "Working for May Chen at the laundry, managing her accounts and correspondence." Daniel's face lit up. "That is wonderful news. May is a good woman, honest and fair. You will be treated well there." He paused. "Though I hope you know my offer to help was genuine. You do not have to struggle alone." "I know," Wilhelmina said, "and I appreciate that. But I need to know I can take care of myself. Dependence on a man's charity, even well-meaning charity, is too close to the life I was running from." "I can understand that," Daniel said. They had reached the boarding house, and he stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Miss Dalton, I enjoyed this evening immensely. Might I call on you again, perhaps Sunday afternoon? I would like to show you my ranch if you would be willing to take a ride out there." "I would like that, Mr. Walker." Wilhelmina realized she meant it. The evening had been surprisingly pleasant, the conversation easy and genuine. Daniel Walker was nothing like the men she had known in Boston, but perhaps that was not such a bad thing. He tipped his hat to her and turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. "Wilhelmina, if I may be so bold to use your given name, I want you to know that stopping you from boarding that train was the bravest thing I have ever done. Thank you for not thinking me completely insane." "Call me Willa," she heard herself say. "My friends call me Willa." His smile in the moonlight was genuine and warm. "Good night, Willa. Sweet dreams." That night, lying in her bed, Willa reflected on how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday at this time, she had been preparing to give up and go home. Now she had a job, a place to live, and the beginning of something she was not quite ready to name with a man she barely knew but found herself wanting to know better. The next few weeks fell into a pleasant rhythm. Willa worked at the laundry 5 days a week. Learning the business and helping may expand her customer base by writing professional advertisements and introducing more efficient bookkeeping methods. She discovered she had a talent for business management, and May was appreciative of her contributions, even giving her a small raise after the first week. Daniel called on her 3 times a week, as they had agreed. He took her to dinner again, to a dance at the community hall where he admitted he was not much of a dancer but tried anyway, making her laugh when he stepped on her toes. They went on long walks through the countryside surrounding Hawthorne, where he taught her to identify different plants and animal tracks. He showed her his ranch, a neat spread of grassland nestled in the hills, with a sturdy cabin he had built himself, a barn for his horses, and several hundred head of cattle grazing on the range. "It is not fancy," he said, almost apologetically, as they sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. "But it is mine, built with my own hands and my own work." "It is beautiful," Willa said honestly. The ranch was isolated but not lonely, peaceful in a way that her life in Boston had never been. She could imagine living here, waking up to these sunrises, falling asleep to the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. The thought surprised her with its clarity. As November turned to December, Willa found herself thinking about Daniel more and more. She looked forward to his visits with an anticipation that went beyond mere politeness. She caught herself smiling at random moments during the day, remembering something funny he had said or the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. When he accidentally brushed her hand while helping her over a stream during one of their walks, the jolt of electricity she felt was undeniable. One evening in mid-December, Daniel arrived at the boarding house looking nervous. "Willa, I have something I need to tell you and I am not sure how you will take it." Her heart sank. This was it, she thought. He was going to tell her this was not working out, that he had made a mistake, that she should book passage back to Boston after all. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," he said bluntly, his gray eyes intense. "I know we agreed to take this slow, and I know it has only been a few weeks, but I cannot pretend anymore. Every time I see you, every time we talk, every time you smile at me, I fall a little harder. And I need to know if there is any chance, any possibility at all that you might feel the same way." Willa stood frozen, her heart pounding. This was too fast, too sudden. She barely knew him. And yet, looking at him standing there with his heart in his eyes, she knew that she did know him, in all the ways that mattered. She knew he was kind to animals and respectful to women. She knew he was honest and hardworking. She knew he listened when she talked about her ideas and dreams, really listened, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. And she knew that when she imagined her future, he was increasingly present in those imaginings. "Daniel," she said softly, using his given name for the first time, "I think I might be falling in love with you too, and that terrifies me." The relief on his face was profound. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I came west to be independent, to prove I did not need a man to complete my life. Falling in love feels like giving up on that dream, like admitting I was wrong all along." She twisted her hands together, trying to find the right words. "In Boston, love was always about possession. Men married women to acquire them like property. I wanted to be free of that." Daniel stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the sage and leather scent of him. "Willa, loving you does not mean possessing you. It means partnering with you, standing beside you, supporting your dreams while you support mine. If we were to build a life together, it would be our life, not mine with you as an accessory. Do you understand the difference?" "I want to," she whispered. "I want to believe that is possible. Then let me prove it to you." He took her hand gently and she did not pull away. "Give us more time. Keep working at the laundry if it makes you happy. Keep your independence. All I am asking is that you let me love you while you do it." Willa looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused, her smaller and ink-stained from her bookkeeping work. They were from completely different worlds, and yet somehow, impossibly, they fit together. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will give us more time." He kissed her then, softly and carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. It was nothing like the aggressive, possessive kisses Charles Pemberton had tried to steal from her before she left Boston. This was gentle and asking, a question rather than a demand, and when she kissed him back, she felt something settle into place in her heart. They stood on the porch of the boarding house, wrapped in each other's arms as the December stars came out above them, and Willa felt for the first time since leaving Boston that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Christmas came, and with it a cold snap that was unusual for the Nevada high desert. Daniel gave Willa a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For your thoughts and dreams," he said. "You are always talking about wanting to write about your experiences out west. I thought you might like a proper place to keep those stories." She gave him a warm wool scarf she had knitted in secret over the past few weeks, working on it in her room at night after dinner. "For those cold mornings when you are out checking on your cattle," she said. "I do not want you catching a chill." They spent Christmas Day at the ranch, and Willa helped Daniel prepare a turkey dinner, laughing at her own inadequate cooking skills. She had never learned to cook properly in Boston, where her family had servants to handle such tasks. Daniel was patient and amused by her disasters, and together they managed to produce a meal that was at least edible. "When I was planning this courtship, I did not think about the practical details," he admitted over dessert, a pie that Willa had actually managed to make successfully. "If we were to marry, would you want to learn to cook, or would you prefer to hire someone to help with the household tasks?" The casual mention of marriage made Willa's heart skip, but she tried to answer seriously. "I think I would like to learn at least the basics. I do not want to be completely dependent on hired help, but I also do not think I have much natural talent for domestic arts. That is fine by me. I did not fall in love with you for your cooking skills." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "Willa, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer." She braced herself, sensing something important was coming. "My ranch is doing well, better than I expected for this time of year. I have managed to save a considerable amount, and I am planning to expand next spring, maybe buy some more breeding stock, hire a few hands to help with the work. It is going to be a busy time, and I would really like to have you by my side for it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. I know we said we would take our time, and I am not trying to rush you, but I have to ask. Do you see a future here with me? Or are you still thinking about going back to Boston eventually? Willa looked around the cabin, at the simple furniture Daniel had built, at the stone fireplace where a cheerful fire crackled, at the windows that looked out over the beautiful harsh landscape. She thought about her job at the laundry, about May's friendship and respect. She thought about the life she had left behind in Boston, the suffocating expectations and endless rules. I do not want to go back to Boston, she said slowly. I think I have known that for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it. My family is there, and I suppose I will always love them in a way, but that is not my home anymore, if it ever really was. And could this be your home? Daniel's voice was quiet, vulnerable. Could I be your home? Willa stood up and walked around the table to where he sat. She cupped his face in her hands, looking into those gray eyes that had become so dear to her. Daniel Walker, I think you already are. He pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling safe and wanted in a way she never had before. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers, neither of them needing to speak. In January, a letter arrived from Boston. Willa's mother had written, demanding to know why her daughter had not returned as planned and insisting she come home immediately. The letter was full of worry and anger in equal measure, with several pointed comments about reputations and proper behavior. Willa showed the letter to Daniel, who read it with a furrowed brow. Are you going to tell them about us? He asked. I have to, Willa said. I cannot keep hiding this. But I am not sure how to explain our situation in a way they will understand. She paced the floor of the boarding house parlor, agitated. My mother will have hysterics when she learns I am being courted by a rancher. My father will probably disown me, and my sisters will think I have lost my mind. Have you? Daniel asked gently. Lost your mind, I mean. Willa stopped pacing and looked at him. Probably. By Boston standards, I am throwing away everything for a man I have known for 2 months. But Daniel, I do not care what Boston thinks anymore. This is my life, my choice, and I am choosing you. I am choosing us. Then tell them that, he said. Write to them honestly. Tell them you have found something worth staying for and that you are happy. If they love you, truly love you, they will come to accept it eventually. Willa spent hours crafting her response, trying to find the right words to explain her decision without causing too much hurt or worry. She told her parents about Daniel, about his ranch, about how he treated her with respect and kindness. She told them about her job at the laundry, about her growing love for the Nevada territory despite its harshness. And she told them, as gently as possible, that she was not coming home because she had already found her home, and it was not in Boston. The reply, when it came several weeks later, was predictably upset. Her mother wrote of disappointment and scandal. Her father wrote a brief note about rash decisions and squandered opportunities. But there was also a letter from her youngest sister, Emily, who wrote that she thought it was terribly romantic and brave, and that she hoped Willa would be happy, and please write with more details about this mysterious cowboy. Willa cried a little when she read Emily's letter, grateful for at least one family member who seemed to understand. Daniel held her while she cried, not trying to fix it or make it better, just being there. Family is complicated, he said when her tears had subsided. Give them time. Sometimes people need space to adjust to changes they did not see coming. As winter gave way to early spring, Daniel's courtship became more serious. He introduced Willa to his ranch hands, a couple of young men he had hired to help with the spring calving. He took her to a Cattlemen's Association meeting, introducing her as his intended, and while a few eyebrows were raised, most people were polite and welcoming. Word spread through Hawthorne that Daniel Walker and the former schoolteacher were serious about each other, and slowly, Willa began to feel more accepted in the community. Even the school board members who had dismissed her began to nod politely when they passed her on the street, though whether that was due to her own merits or Daniel's respected position in the ranching community, she could not say. In March, on a beautiful spring evening with wildflowers blooming across the desert, Daniel took Willa to a spot on his ranch where a natural spring fed a small pool of clear water. Cottonwood trees grew around it, their new leaves bright green against the blue sky. "This is my favorite place on the whole property," he said, helping her down from her horse. "When I first found this land, this spring is what convinced me to buy it. I knew that with reliable water, I could make the ranch work." They walked to the edge of the pool, where the water reflected the sky like a mirror. Willa dipped her fingers in, surprised by how cold it was. "Willa," Daniel said, and something in his tone made her turn to face him. He was kneeling on one knee, holding a small box in his hand. "I know we have only known each other for 5 months, which is not very long by some standards. But in that time, you have become the most important person in my life. You challenge me, inspire me, make me want to be a better man. You have brought color and joy to days that used to be just about work and survival." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I do not have much to offer you compared to what you could have had back in Boston. Just a ranch in the middle of the Nevada territory, a man who works with his hands, and a love that will last until the day I die. But if that is enough, if I am enough, then Wilhelmina Dalton, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Willa felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears this time. She had known this was coming, had been expecting it for weeks, but the reality of it was still overwhelming. This was the moment where she made her final choice, where she committed fully to this new life she had been building. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Daniel, I will marry you. You are more than enough. You are everything." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, and she realized he must have asked May to find out her ring size. "I love you," she said, kissing him. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," he replied, holding her close. "And Willa, I promise you this. Our marriage will be a partnership. Your dreams are as important as mine. If you want to keep working at the laundry, you can. If you want to start a school on the ranch for the local children, we can build one. If you want to write your stories and maybe even publish them, I will support you. Whatever you need to be happy and fulfilled, I will do everything in my power to help you achieve it." Those words, more than the ring or the proposal itself, convinced Willa that she was making the right choice. This was not a man who wanted to own her or change her. This was a man who wanted to build a life alongside her, respecting who she was and who she wanted to become. They were married 6 weeks later, in early May of 1877, in a simple ceremony at the community church in Hawthorne. May stood up with Willa as her witness, and one of Daniel's ranch hands stood up for him. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears, and even Mr. Griggs from the general store came and wished them well. Willa wore a simple white dress that May had helped her alter from a gown she had brought from Boston. Daniel wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Daniel kissed her in front of the whole congregation, Willa felt a sense of rightness that she had never experienced before. They held a small reception at the hotel, with cake and dancing. Mrs. Chen brought special dumplings she had made, and several of Daniel's fellow ranchers came with their wives to celebrate. It was nothing like the elaborate society weddings Willa had attended in Boston, but it was perfect because it was real and filled with people who genuinely cared about them. That night, Daniel carried Willa over the threshold of the ranch house that would now be their home. He had been working on it in secret for weeks, adding a second room, building new furniture, making it a proper home for a married couple. "Welcome home, Mrs. Walker," he said, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Walker," Willa repeated, testing out the name. It sounded strange but good, like putting on a new coat that fits surprisingly well. "I like the sound of that." Their wedding night was tender and gentle, Daniel taking care to make sure she was comfortable and happy. Willa had been nervous about this aspect of marriage, having heard various conflicting information from her married sisters. But Daniel was patient and loving, and she discovered that physical intimacy with someone you truly loved was nothing to fear. The next morning, waking up in Daniel's arms with the sun streaming through the window, Willa thought about how much her life had changed in 6 months. She had gone from a failed school teacher, planning to return home in defeat, to a married woman with a home and a husband she loved. It was remarkable how quickly life could transform when you were brave enough to take a chance. Married life suited them both. Willa continued working at the laundry for a few more months, helping May train a new bookkeeper, before finally stepping away to focus on the ranch. She discovered she enjoyed ranch work more than she had expected. She learned to help with branding, to assist with the spring roundup, to keep the ranch accounts and manage supplies. She was not a natural cowgirl by any means, but she was competent and willing to learn. Daniel was true to his word about their marriage being a partnership. He consulted her on major decisions about the ranch, valued her input on business matters, and never tried to limit her activities or interests. When she expressed a desire to start teaching again, he helped her build a small schoolhouse on their property and spread the word that she would be offering lessons to any children in the area whose families wanted education for them. Within a month, she had 8 students, ranging in age from 6 to 14, including 2 children from Chinese families who had never had access to formal education before. Willa taught them reading, writing, arithmetic, and science, using books she had brought from Boston and ordered from catalogs. Daniel built desks and a chalkboard, and the little schoolhouse became a point of pride for the whole community. By autumn, Willa realized she was pregnant. The morning sickness started in September, and after a visit to the doctor in Hawthorne confirmed her suspicions. She told Daniel the news one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Probably in early March, the doctor thinks." Daniel's face went through a series of emotions: shock, joy, fear, and then pure happiness. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "Willa, that is the best news I have ever received. You are not worried?" she asked. She had been anxious about telling him, afraid he might think it was too soon or that she would not be able to handle both motherhood and her other responsibilities. "Of course I am worried." "I am terrified," he admitted, "but I am also thrilled. We are going to have a child, Willa, a little person who is half you and half me. How could I be anything but happy about that?" The pregnancy was difficult at times. Willa had severe morning sickness for the first few months, and later, as she grew larger, she found it hard to manage her usual activities. She had to close the school temporarily, much to her students' disappointment, and spending long days on her feet became impossible. Daniel was endlessly patient and supportive. He took over most of the household chores without complaint, brought her tea and crackers when the nausea was bad, and held her at night when she worried about whether she would be a good mother. He read to her from the newspaper and books, kept her company when she was too tired to do anything but rest, and reminded her constantly that she was beautiful even when she felt like a beached whale. In late February, a cold snap brought unusual snow to the Nevada desert. Willa watched the white flakes fall from the warmth of their cabin, one hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick and roll inside her. Any day now, the doctor had said. Any day now, everything would change again. The baby came in the early morning hours of March 3rd, 1878, after a long and exhausting labor. May came to help, having more experience with childbirth than Daniel, and between her capable hands and Daniel's anxious presence, Willa managed to bring a healthy baby boy into the world. "He is perfect," Daniel whispered, holding his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "Willa, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas Daniel Walker, Thomas after Willa's grandfather and Daniel for his father. He had dark hair like Daniel and Willa's hazel eyes, and from the moment he was born, he had his father wrapped completely around his tiny finger. Adjusting to life with a baby was challenging. Thomas was a fussy infant, crying at odd hours and demanding constant attention. Willa was exhausted and overwhelmed, struggling to balance motherhood with everything else she wanted to do. There were days when she cried from frustration and fatigue, wondering if she had been wrong to think she could have both a family and her other pursuits. But Daniel was there through all of it, changing diapers, walking the floor with Thomas when he would not sleep, taking the baby so Willa could rest. "We are in this together," he kept reminding her. "You do not have to do everything yourself." As Thomas grew from an infant into a chubby, cheerful toddler, life settled into a new normal. Willa reopened her school when Thomas was 6 months old, bringing him with her and teaching while he played on a blanket in the corner. Her students were delighted to have a baby to dote on, and the older girls often helped watch him during lessons. The ranch continued to prosper. Daniel's careful management and good instincts about cattle breeding paid off, and they were able to expand their operation, buying more land and hiring more hands. Willa managed the business side, keeping books, handling correspondence with buyers, and negotiating contracts. Together, they built something solid and lasting. In the fall of 1879, Willa received a surprising letter from her mother. It was not warm or effusive, but it was civil, asking about her life and her child and expressing a desire to possibly visit Nevada and meet her grandson. It was not a full reconciliation, but it was a start, and Willa wrote back immediately, extending an invitation for the following spring when travel would be easier. Her parents came in May of 1880, arriving in a hired carriage looking dusty and uncomfortable. Her father was grayer than Willa remembered, her mother more worn. They looked around at the ranch with obvious skepticism, and Willa braced herself for criticism and judgment. But something changed when they met Thomas, who was now 2 years old and full of energy and charm. Her father's stern expression softened as his grandson climbed into his lap, babbling about horses and cattle. Her mother actually smiled when Thomas insisted on showing her the chickens. Over the week they stayed, Willa watched her parents slowly come to understand her life. Her father talked with Daniel about ranching and business, clearly impressed by the younger man's intelligence and work ethic. Her mother helped Willa with household tasks and got to know May and Mrs. Chen, surprised to find that Willa had built real friendships in this frontier town. On their last evening, Willa's mother took her aside on the porch. "I will not pretend I understand your choices," she said carefully. "This life is so different from what we wanted for you, what we thought you should want. But I can see that you are happy, truly happy, in a way you never were in Boston. And your husband clearly adores you and treats you well. That is more than many women can say about their marriages, even in our social circles. Thank you, Mother, Willa said, tears in her eyes. That means more to me than you know. You were always headstrong and independent, her mother continued. Even as a little girl, you wanted to do things your own way. I thought the West would break that spirit, make you realize you needed to come home. But instead, you found a place that let you be exactly who you are. I suppose I should be proud of that. I hope you can be, Willa said softly. I know I disappointed you by not following the path you laid out for me, but I needed to find my own path, and I did. I found it with Daniel, here in Nevada. When her parents left, the parting was emotional but hopeful. Her father pressed money into Daniel's hand for Thomas's future education, despite Daniel's protests. Her mother hugged Willa tightly, whispering that she loved her and was proud of her, even if it had taken her too long to say so. Life continued its steady rhythm. Willa had another baby in 1881, a daughter they named Catherine after Daniel's mother. She was an easier baby than Thomas had been, calm and content, with Daniel's gray eyes and a sunny disposition. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything and constantly bringing her toys and blankets. The school grew, adding more students as word spread about the quality of education Willa provided. Some families traveled from as far as 20 miles away to bring their children to her lessons. She eventually had to hire an assistant teacher, a young woman from Reno named Sarah who shared Willa's passion for education. In 1883, Daniel and Willa celebrated their 6th anniversary. They had a special dinner at the hotel in Hawthorne, leaving the children with May for the evening. Sitting across from her husband, Willa marveled at how different her life was from what she had imagined back in Boston. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Staying here with me instead of going back east?" "Never," Willa said firmly. "Daniel, stopping me from boarding that train was the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be, to build a life on my own terms. How could I regret that, even on the hard days?" he pressed. "When the cattle prices are low, or the children are sick, or the work seems endless, especially on the hard days," Willa said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Because those are the days when I see what we have built together, how we support each other through difficulties. I never would have had that in Boston. I would have been a banker's wife, hosting tea parties and managing servants, slowly dying of boredom and frustration. Here, I am alive. I am myself, and I have you." Daniel raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You have no idea how much I love you, Willa Walker. Every day for the rest of my life, I will thank whatever fate or luck or providence brought you to that train station on that particular day." As the years passed, the ranch became one of the most successful operations in the territory. Daniel's reputation for breeding quality cattle spread, and buyers came from as far as San Francisco to purchase his stock. Willa's school gained a reputation as well, and several of her students went on to attend universities back east, an almost unheard of accomplishment for frontier children. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books as much as his mother and ranching as much as his father. Catherine was bright and adventurous, constantly getting into scrapes and asking impossible questions. In 1885, Willa had another baby, a second son they named James, who was calm and observant, taking everything in with wide eyes. Managing 3 children, a school, and helping run the ranch kept Willa busy, but she thrived on the challenge. She had learned to balance her various roles, accepting that she could not do everything perfectly, but she could do everything well enough. Daniel continued to be her partner in every sense, sharing the work and the joys and the inevitable sorrows that came with building a life together. In 1887, Nevada officially became a state, and Hawthorne held a huge celebration. Daniel and Willa attended with their children, proud to be part of this growing territory that had become their home. Willa thought about the young woman who had stood on the train platform 10 years ago, defeated and ready to give up. She wished she could tell that younger version of herself that everything would work out better than she could have imagined. As Thomas approached his 10th birthday, he announced that he wanted to be a rancher like his father. Catherine, at 7, declared she wanted to be a doctor, which raised eyebrows among many in town but which Willa supported wholeheartedly. James, at 3, was still too young to know what he wanted, but he followed his father around the ranch with devoted attention, mimicking everything Daniel did. One evening in the spring of 1888, after the children were in bed, Daniel and Willa sat on their porch watching the stars come out. It was peaceful and quiet, the kind of moment they both treasured. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Daniel asked. "Before we were married, when I was trying to convince you that a cowboy like me was worth taking a chance on." "I remember," Willa said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I thought you were crazy proposing this whole arrangement. I barely knew you, and yet you stayed." Daniel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You took a chance on us, on this life, on me." "That was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do." "I do not know if it was brave or just desperate," Willa admitted. "I did not want to go back to Boston, and you offered me a reason to stay. I think part of me knew even then that you were special, that this could be something real." "It became something real, did it not?" Daniel said softly. "More real than I ever dared to hope for." Willa thought about their life together, about the ranch they had built, the children they were raising, the community they were part of. She thought about her school, her students, her friendships. She thought about the challenges they had faced and overcome together, the losses and the victories, the ordinary days and the extraordinary moments. "Yes," she said finally, "it became something more wonderful than I could have imagined." "You asked me to give you a chance that day at the train station, Daniel. But really, you gave me a chance. A chance to be who I really am, to build the life I really wanted, to love and be loved without conditions or expectations. You set me free, and then you chose to stay by my side anyway. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had taken a wild chance on each other and built something lasting. The desert night was cool and clear, full of stars, full of possibility. Somewhere in the house, one of the children stirred and settled back into sleep. Cattle lowed in the distance. A coyote called to its mate across the range. This was home, Willa thought. Not the place, though she loved the ranch and the Nevada territory. Home was this man beside her, their children sleeping safely, the life they had created together through hard work and deep love. Home was knowing that whatever challenges came, they would face them together. Home was the promise they had made to each other 11 years ago, a promise kept every single day since. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Daniel replied, kissing the top of her head. "Always have, always will." As the years continued to unfold, their love only deepened. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market crashes and personal losses. When Daniel's favorite horse died of old age, Willa held him while he grieved. When Willa's father passed away in 1890, Daniel traveled with her back to Boston for the funeral, supporting her through the complex emotions of losing a parent with whom she had finally reconciled. Thomas did become a rancher, working alongside his father and eventually taking over more of the daily operations as Daniel reached his 50s. Catherine, determined and brilliant, defied all expectations by gaining admission to a women's medical college in Philadelphia, becoming one of the few female doctors in the West when she returned to Nevada to practice. James found his calling in law, becoming an attorney who specialized in land rights and water disputes, crucial issues in the developing state. Willa continued teaching well into her 50s, finally retiring when arthritis made writing on the chalkboard too painful. But she never stopped being an educator, tutoring students privately and writing articles about education and frontier life that were published in various newspapers and magazines. Her memoir, From Boston to the Range, A Woman's Journey West, was published in 1895 and became a modest success, providing inspiration to other women contemplating unconventional paths. Daniel and Willa became grandparents in 1898 when Thomas married a lovely young woman named Anna, and they had a daughter. More grandchildren followed over the years, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter during holidays and family gatherings. Daniel taught his grandchildren to ride and rope, while Willa read them stories and taught them their letters. On their 30th anniversary in 1907, their children organized a huge celebration at the ranch. Friends and family came from all over Nevada and beyond. Willa's sister, Emily, traveled from Boston with her own family. Former students, now adults with children of their own, came to honor the teacher who had changed their lives. The party lasted all day and into the evening, with music and dancing and feasting. As the sun set and the party wound down, Daniel led Willa away from the crowd to their special spot by the spring where he had proposed 30 years before. The cottonwood trees were much larger now, providing deep shade, and someone had built a bench where they could sit and watch the water. 30 years, Daniel said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I grabbed your wrist at the train station, terrified you would get on that train and disappear from my life forever. And sometimes it feels like we have always been together, Willa added. She was 60 years old now, her auburn hair liberally streaked with silver, her face lined with the marks of decades spent in the harsh Nevada sun. But Daniel still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. You know what the best part is? Daniel asked. After 30 years of marriage, I still learn new things about you. You still surprise me. You still make me laugh. I still want to tell you about my day and hear about yours. That has not faded at all. Because we built something real, Willa said. Not the romantic fantasy that is all passion and intensity but burns out quickly. We built a partnership, a friendship, a love that grows stronger with time instead of weaker. We built a life together, Daniel, and it has been a beautiful life. They sat in companionable silence, hands linked, watching the water reflect the last light of day. Around them, they could hear the sounds of their family, their legacy children and grandchildren, the ranch that would continue for generations, the community they had helped build and strengthen. If you could go back, Daniel asked, back to that day at the train station, knowing everything that would happen, all the hard times and the good times, would you make the same choice? Willa did not hesitate. In a heartbeat. I would choose you, choose us, choose this life every single time. You stopped me from boarding that train, Daniel, but what you really did was save me. You saved me from a half-life of unfulfilled dreams and suffocated hopes. You gave me the chance to become fully myself. How could I ever regret that? I think we saved each other, Daniel said quietly. I was just existing before you came into my life, working and surviving but not really living. You brought color and meaning and joy to everything. You made me want to be better, do better, dream bigger. Together, we have built something neither of us could have created alone. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, they made their way back to the house where their family waited. The party was still going, though quieter now, with people sitting in small groups talking and laughing. Grandchildren ran around playing games while their parents tried half-heartedly to settle them down. Willa looked around at all of it, the home they had built, the family they had raised, the love that permeated every corner of their lives, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had taken a chance on a cowboy who stopped her from boarding a train 30 years ago, and that single decision had shaped everything that came after. It had been the right decision, the best decision, the decision that had allowed her to become exactly who she was meant to be. Daniel squeezed her hand and she squeezed back, a silent communication that needed no words. They had said, "I love you" thousands of times over the decades, but it never got old, never became routine. Each time meant something. Each time was a renewal of the choice they had made to build a life together. Their daughter Catherine approached with her medical bag, having been called away to attend to a neighbor's injury earlier, but returned for the end of the celebration. "Mother, father, you look tired. Should I be concerned?" Her doctor's instincts were always active, even at family parties. "We are fine, darling, just enjoying the evening," Willa assured her. "Though I confess all this excitement has worn me out a bit." "You have earned the right to be tired," Catherine said, kissing her mother's cheek. 30 years of marriage, 3 children, too many students to count, running a ranch, writing a book. "I think you have done enough for several lifetimes, Mother." "Your mother has never known how to do anything halfway," Daniel said with pride in his voice. "It is one of the things I love most about her." As the evening finally wound to a close, and their family began to depart, Daniel and Willa stood on their porch waving goodbye, their arms around each other's waists. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road and silence settled over the ranch once more, they went inside to their bedroom, the room where they had slept together for 3 decades, where their children had been conceived, where they had comforted each other through illnesses and grief, where they had made plans and dreams. Getting ready for bed had become a familiar routine, comfortable and intimate. They moved around each other with the ease of long practice, Daniel helping Willa with the buttons she could no longer easily reach because of her arthritis, Willa straightening his collar out of habit, even though he was about to remove his shirt. Lying in bed in the darkness, Willa reflected on the journey that had brought her here. If someone had told her, standing on that train platform in 1876, that she would spend the next 3 decades building a life with a cowboy in the Nevada desert, she would have thought them insane. But life had a way of surprising you, of taking you in directions you never anticipated, and sometimes those surprises were exactly what you needed even if you did not know it at the time. "Daniel," she said softly into the darkness. Thank you for stopping me from boarding that train. Thank you for asking me to give you a chance. Thank you for loving me exactly as I am. Thank you for 30 years of partnership and friendship and love. Thank you for this beautiful life we have built together." She felt him shift closer, his arm coming around her. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for taking a chance on a rough cowboy who did not know if he was good enough for a Boston lady but knew he had to try. Thank you for building this life with me, for giving me 3 incredible children, for making me happier than I ever thought possible. I love you, Willa Walker. I have loved you from the moment I first saw you, and I will love you until my last breath." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had for 30 years, as they would for years to come. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched away under the stars, harsh and beautiful, unforgiving and yet somehow the perfect backdrop for the life they had created. The ranch that Daniel had started alone had become their ranch, their home, the foundation for a legacy that would extend far beyond their own lives. The The years that followed brought the inevitable changes of aging. Daniel developed problems with his back from years of hard ranch work. Willa's arthritis worsened, making many tasks difficult. But they adapted, helping each other, relying on their children and hired help when necessary, never losing the essential connection that had sustained them through decades. In 1912, at the age of 65, Willa published her second book, a collection of essays about education, women's rights, and life in the developing West. It was more successful than her first book, and she received letters from women all over the country thanking her for her words and her example. Some of those letters came from young women contemplating their own journeys west, their own chances at independence and self-determination. And Willa answered every one, encouraging them to be brave and true to themselves. Daniel, now 68, officially retired from active ranch management, turning the daily operations over to Thomas while remaining available for advice and consultation. He spent his days working with the horses he loved, teaching his grandchildren and great-grandchildren to ride, and sitting on the porch with Willa, talking about everything and nothing. They celebrated their 40th anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their immediate family. The ranch house was full of photographs now, documenting 4 decades of life together. Wedding pictures, baby pictures, school pictures, ranch pictures, a visual history of a love story that had started with an impulsive decision at a train station and grown into something profound and lasting. 40 years, Willa said, looking at their wedding photograph, 2 young people full of hope and nerves and dreams. We were so young, Daniel. Did we have any idea what we were getting into? Not a clue, Daniel admitted, laughing. But that was probably for the best. If we had known all the challenges ahead, we might have been too scared to try. I would not have been too scared, Willa said firmly. Even knowing everything, all the hard times and difficulties, I would have chosen this. I would have chosen you. Their love story became something of a legend in Hawthorne and the surrounding area. People spoke of the cowboy who stopped the schoolteacher from boarding the train, who asked her to give him a chance, and how that moment of courage and hope had led to a marriage that lasted decades and produced a family that contributed greatly to the community. Young couples sometimes asked them for advice, and Daniel and Willa always said the same things. Respect each other, support each other's dreams, communicate honestly, and never forget that you are on the same team. In the spring of 1917, Daniel fell ill with pneumonia. At 73, his body did not have the strength to fight it off the way it might have when he was younger. Willa stayed by his bedside day and night, reading to him, talking to him, holding his hand. Their children gathered, preparing for the worst, but Daniel rallied, his stubborn constitution pulling him through. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," he told Willa when he was finally on the mend. "I have at least another decade in me, maybe 2. "Good," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Because I am not ready to lose you, I will never be ready to lose you." But the illness had taken its toll, and Daniel never fully recovered his former vigor. He tired more easily, needed more rest, moved more slowly. Willa adjusted her own activities to stay near him, and they spent long hours together talking about their life, their family, their memories. On a clear autumn day in 1919, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Daniel turned to Willa with a serious expression. "I need to tell you something," he said, "in case I do not get another chance." "Daniel, do not talk like that," Willa protested, but he squeezed her hand gently. "Just listen. I need you to know that stopping you from boarding that train back in 1876 was the single most important thing I ever did in my life." Everything good that has happened to me, everything meaningful and worthwhile, stems from that one moment of courage when I decided to take a chance. You have been my partner, my best friend, my love, my everything for 42 years. If I died tomorrow, I would die a happy man, knowing I had the privilege of spending my life with you. Willa was crying openly now. Daniel Walker, you are the great love of my life. I was lost when you found me, running away from one life but not sure how to build another. You did not just ask me to stay. You helped me figure out who I really was and who I wanted to be. You gave me space to grow while never letting me doubt that I was loved. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars began to appear. Two people who had built a lifetime of love on a foundation of chance and courage. Whatever time they had left, whether it was months or years, they would face it together as they had faced everything else with honesty, humor, and an unshakable commitment to each other. Daniel lived another 5 years, making it to their 47th anniversary. He died peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night in 1924, with Willa lying beside him. He was 79 years old, and he had lived a full, rich life surrounded by love. Willa mourned him deeply, feeling like part of herself had been torn away. But she also felt profound gratitude for the 47 years they had shared, for the family they had created, for the life they had built. She continued living at the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, spending her days writing and teaching and passing on the wisdom she had gained through decades of living fully. She lived to the remarkable age of 90, passing away peacefully in 1927. In her final years, she often told the story of the cowboy who stopped her from boarding the train, who asked her to give him a chance, who changed the entire trajectory of her life with one bold request. It had been the defining moment of her existence, the point where everything shifted and became possible. At her funeral, attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched through teaching, writing, and simple kindness, her children read from her journals and letters. The words painted a picture of a woman who had been brave enough to take a chance on an uncertain future, who had found love and purpose in unexpected places, who had lived according to her own principles, even when it was difficult. Thomas, now 50 years old and a respected rancher in his own right, spoke about his parents' love story. My father always said that the bravest thing he ever did was stop my mother from boarding that train, but my mother used to say that the bravest thing she ever did was stay. They were both right. It took courage for both of them to take that chance, to build something together when they barely knew each other, to commit to a partnership that would last their entire lives. But that courage gave them, and all of us, something beautiful. Their love created a family, a legacy, and a lesson about what it means to truly commit to another person. Willa was buried next to Daniel on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land and the family they had created together. The simple headstone read, Wilhelmina Dalton Walker, 1854–1927, beloved wife, mother, teacher, and friend. She took a chance on love and built a beautiful life. Next to it, Daniel's headstone read, Daniel Walker, 1850–1924, beloved husband, father, and rancher. He asked her to stay, and she said yes. The ranch continued under Thomas's management, passed eventually to his son, and then to his grandson, maintaining the Walker family legacy for generations. The little schoolhouse Willa had built became a museum dedicated to education in Frontier, Nevada, preserving her teaching materials and some of her personal effects. Her books remained in print, inspiring new generations of women to pursue their dreams and take chances on unconventional paths. But perhaps the greatest legacy of Daniel and Willa Walker was not the ranch or the school or the books. It was the lesson they taught about love, that real love is not about possession or control, but about partnership and respect. That sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single moment of courage, a willingness to take a chance on something unknown. That building a life with another person requires daily effort and commitment, but that effort is rewarded with joy and meaning and connection that lasts beyond a single lifetime. Their story became the kind of tale that people told and retold, embellishing some details, forgetting others, but always keeping the essential truth at its heart. A cowboy saw a woman about to leave, recognized something special in her, found the courage to ask her to stay, and she found the courage to say yes. And from that single moment, from that leap of faith, came a love story that endured for nearly 5 decades and created ripples that spread far beyond the Nevada desert where it began. Years later, a great-great-granddaughter of Daniel and Willa would stand at the train station in Hawthorne, now preserved as a historical site, and imagine her ancestors standing there in 1876. She would think about the courage it took for both of them in that moment, Daniel to reach out and ask, Willa to trust and stay. She would think about how different all their lives would have been if Willa had pulled her arm free and boarded that train, disappearing into the east and the life that waited for her there. But she had not. She had taken a chance on a cowboy who saw something in her worth fighting for, and that decision had changed everything. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important moments in life are the ones where you choose to be brave, to take a risk, to say yes to possibility even when the sensible thing would be to play it safe. The Walker family ranch still stood, a testament to the love and partnership that had created it. The descendants of Daniel and Willa still lived in Nevada, contributing to their communities, teaching their children the values of hard work, integrity, and courage that had been passed down through generations. And somewhere in all of them was the echo of that moment at the train station, the moment when everything changed because 2 people decided to take a chance on each other. It had been a beautiful love story, the kind that starts with a leap of faith and grows into something that transcends individual lives to become part of a family's identity. Daniel and Willa had shown that true love is not just about passion and romance, though they had plenty of both. It is about choosing each other every day, about supporting each other's dreams, about building something together that is greater than what either person could create alone. Their story ended, as all stories must, but the love they created continued on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It continued in the ranch that still bore the Walker name. It continued in the lessons they taught and the example they set. Most of all, it continued in the reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is take a chance on love, even when it seems impulsive or impractical or impossible. Because Daniel took a chance when he stopped Willa from boarding that train. Willa took a chance when she stepped back onto the platform. And together, they built a lifetime of love on that foundation of shared courage and mutual respect. That was their legacy, their gift to the world, their proof that sometimes the wildest chances lead to the most beautiful outcomes. And so their story lived on, told and retold, inspiring others to be brave, to take chances, to believe in the possibility of love even in the most unlikely circumstances. It was a reminder that life's greatest adventures often begin with a single moment of courage, and that the best love stories are the ones where 2 imperfect people choose each other, and then spend a lifetime making that choice worth it. The end.